Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the ruling African National Congress, ANC, resolved that South Africa should quit the International Criminal Court, ICC. He was speaking during a press conference co-hosted with the visiting president of Finland, Sauli Niinisto. Ramaphosa says the decision, which follows a meeting of the ANC, was reached largely because of what is perceived as the court's unfair treatment of certain countries. The ICC issued an arrest warrant against Russia's President Vladimir Putin in March, meaning Pretoria, due to host the Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa bloc summit this year, would have to detain him on arrival. Joining me on the news to discuss this issue is the head of journalism program and political analyst at Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Dr. Hermon Berhane Ogbamichael. Thank you so much for joining us on NC Continental Prime.
Thanks for having me.
Now, with all that has occurred from the president's speech to a statement by the presidency, is it fair for us to say South Africans have been somewhat confused both by government and the governing party?
Well, it's not a new thing for those South Africans who have been following the case with ICC. Actually, South Africa began proceedings against ICC over a dispute when ICC actually had a warrant of arrest, and they have asked the South African government to arrest the former Sudanese president, Omar al-Bashir. So South Africa always believes that there is some sort of double standards and there is some sort of unequal application of international laws against especially Africans. 9 out of the 10 cases that ICC had, for example, they are all African cases, including former president of Ivory Coast, who have been actually prosecuted, President Gbagbo, Laurent Gbagbo. So there has always been an issue. So I don't think South Africans would be confused. And I don't think also the president meant that they had to just withdraw, because the domestic court here in South Africa declared it unconstitutional at some time in point. So I don't think debunking the withdrawal will create some sort of confusion in the public, from what I understand.
Okay, well, the confusion that we're referring to actually is between the government, I mean, having a speech and then later on the presidency saying that it was a mistake from the presidency. But aside all of that, I mean, we are supposed to be seeing Russian President Vladimir Putin in Pretoria in August. What would be the consequences if South Africa fails to detain him if he eventually comes for the BRICS summit?
Well, you know, South Africa is part of BRICS. And trying to arrest the Vladimir Putin would also be consequential in terms of diplomatic aspects with Russia. Funny enough, also 3 countries who have the veto-wielding power in the Security Council, China, Russia, and USA, are not even signatory to the ICC. And we haven't seen any consequences by not arresting Omar al-Bashir. So I don't think there will be serious consequences, but there might be some perceptions issue in terms of, especially Western media and Western world. So okay. That is
all right.
What can only happen.
Let's go through the processes involved. I mean, even if they were to withdraw from the ICC, to take months for it to actualize. So what exactly will be the processes involved for South Africa to actually withdraw, if it tends to withdraw from the ICC? What are the processes that will be involved?
Well, even if it withdraws, then South Africa is obliged to actually be able to arrest anyone who is with a warrant of arrest 12 months after the withdrawal from ICC. but there would only be consequences in terms of perceptions, as they have said, because South Africa historically, pre-1994, came from the apartheid era where there were human rights violations, but in the post-1994, South Africa has got one of the best constitutions that respects human dignity and human rights. So it's only going to be an issue of perceptions, because it's not only South Africa. Many African countries, including Rwanda, Kenya, there was a time Gambia, Burundi, and so on, wanted even to withdraw. Even the African Union, there was a time that they asked almost all countries in Africa to withdraw en masse. It's only, I think, Nigeria and Senegal didn't agree with that. They said individual countries must actually decide individually instead of withdrawing en masse. So I don't think there are consequences, but there could be a legal backlash internal here in South Africa, especially from the constitutional judges.
Now, quickly, looking at the condemnations on the ICC, a lot of people have said that it's been a bit biased, especially when it comes to African cases. And there's been a call for the institution of an African Court of Justice and Human Rights, an African court that will try African leaders. Do you feel that this will solve the situation? And are you also of the same sentiment that the ICC has been a bit biased?
Of course, there has been bias. As I have said, 9 out of 10 are African cases. There was also US, that was accused of human rights violations in countries that it invaded, especially Iraq and Afghanistan and more. And there was Trump at some time in point that he ignored ICC. He saw them as biased. So if African leaders could be arrested, so why not also the Western countries that invaded many countries that also violated human rights in the countries that invaded? So there are double standards, actually. There is a selective application of international law when it comes to ICC. That's why many African countries actually feel that it is prejudiced and biased only selectively against African countries and also now Putin.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Hermon, for joining us in NC Continental Prime and sharing so much insight in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.